Welcome back to Beauty and the Wise, the ultimate lifestyle and wellness podcast where we redefine what it means to age well inside and out by creating a space for women to understand their bodies, their hormones, and their well-being with clarity and confidence. I'm your host, Kisha Tyrrell, and today we are diving into a part of the menopause journey that often goes unspoken: the emotional and mental health impact of hormonal change. So many women tell me they don't feel like themselves anymore. They're overwhelmed, they're anxious, they're forgetful, easily irritated, or just emotionally drained. And they forget to connect these shifts to perimenopause or menopause. But our minds and our hormones are deeply connected. That's why I'm so excited to sit down with today's guest, Dayla Burgess, therapist and owner of TeleConnect. Dayla brings a fresh, grounded, and compassionate perspective to mental and emotional wellness. Today, we're going to talk about what's really happening in the brain during hormonal changes, how to cope, and how we can support ourselves and the women around us with more understanding and grace. Welcome, Dayla. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here.
Yes.
So before we get started, how about you tell us about yourself? What got you into emotional and mental wellness? Like, what started this?
So it's a bit of a story. I'll try to keep it brief. So my name is Dayla Burgess, as you already introduced. I'm the founder of TeleConnect Bermuda. We're an online mental health practice that caters to counseling for adults and their families. So I've been a licensed counselor for nearly 9 years. And of that 9 years, I've only been in business for myself once. So I'm a new baby entrepreneur, but it's been so fulfilling and I'm so grateful. And the reason why I chose this career path, I really think it chose me when I think about it on like a silver lining kind of North Star perspective. But this field has a lot to do with my own story, right? And my own reason, my own why, my lived experience. And I really just wanted to create a space. It started off even before I started to became a licensed practice to provide service or, have a small business. It really started off as a conduit, as a bridge, a connector, because during the 2020 worldwide health crisis, folks just, needed something to make sense of what we were going through.
Yes.
And so it started off as just something that was a part of my story and something that I really needed at the time. And then it bloomed into a full-on practice. So here we are.
Nice. And that's how it happened.
Yes.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about hormonal health and the connection.
Yes.
When most people think about perimenopause and menopause, they talk about the physical symptoms.
Yes.
Hot flashes, changes in weight, fatigue, but no one speaks to the mental and emotional aspect of things, which is so real.
Yes.
How do you make that connection to your clients when they come to you?
So as a philosophy, a basic principle that I use when I'm working with folks is that there is a deep, deep mind-body connection. And historically, when we look at medicine or even psychology and where it originated from, a lot of times we, as the professional, would separate the mind from the body. And so it's really important to normalize, especially when we're trying to unlearn a lot of that being hard on ourselves and why we're not functioning the way that we used to, that it's all one system. It's really important to take care of ourselves from a holistic approach. So that's the first thing, to normalize the mind-body connection and then understand what I kind of do in my role as a clinician or counselor when I'm working with people is to help them understand that hormones play such a core part of our overall mental health and wellness experience. They influence our mood, our cognitive ability, our ability to plan and make decisions, our energy, motivation, and even our ability to stay emotionally regulated. It's kind of at the core of that whole mental health experience. And we don't break it down that way, but when we unpack what it actually means to have a mental health issue, hormones are at the center. They really do play an essential role. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think one of the, there's so many common emotional changes that people go through that they don't necessarily connect. What do you see most so often when people are coming to you?
So when I'm working with women, especially in later stages or not even later stages, middle age, right? A lot of times hormonal imbalances can mimic mental health issues. And so when someone comes in and they're talking about a lot of the changes, and sometimes there's such a disconnect between what I'm experiencing and why it's happening.
Okay.
So my job is really to help them begin to make sense of what it could be and kind of rule out those psychological versus physiological symptoms, right?
Okay.
And sometimes, so remaining in my scope of practice, I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist.
Yes.
So sometimes it does take, ensuring that they've seen their GP. Sometimes talking to them about if their GP can recommend them to a specialist, because we do have hormonal doctors and coaches, like yourself, who specialize in these conversations. So, helping them to understand that, number one, there is an overlap, but sometimes it's important to rule out things so that you can have a bit more clarity. Because when you're clear on what your emotional experience is, you really do feel empowered and confident enough to make a decision on how to actually treat it and proceed.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And it's interesting. I did a post on social media a couple of weeks ago, and it was something to the effect of, women over a certain age, we don't know if we're tired sad or financially sad or hungry sad or whatever, but there is a difference between an hormonally driven mood versus a more deeper mental health issue like anxiety or depression.
Absolutely.
How do we know the difference?
So there are a few things that I would encourage, say, my clients to do, right? So it's really paying attention on purpose. Mindfulness is a really useful practice in understanding what could possibly be happening. So sometimes it can be difficult because we live such very overstimulated lives. We're always being called or demanded to have our attention split in multiple arenas, which could also be a part of the hormonal imbalance and the mental health, frustration. So it really does require you to pay attention on purpose. That may look like journaling. That may look like taking an inventory after you wake up, before you go to sleep. It, of course, looks like talking to a medical professional. But also, when I'm having these conversations around taking care of your mental health, it's also ensuring that you're meeting those core areas of like wellness. So, when we talk about hormones that may be out of whack or dysregulated, sometimes we don't have enough of those feel-good hormones in our bodies, right? So serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, all of those positive, like really feel-good hormones actually can be cultivated. So are you getting enough rest at night? Are you feeding your gut and your belly things that are enhancing your energy and that serotonin? By the way, 90% I think it's 80 to 90% of the serotonin that we produce is made in our guts.
Oh my God.
Right? That's what the mental health research is saying. So if you're not fueling yourself with the proper foods and getting enough fiber, protein, anti-inflammatory, all the things, you're gonna feel indifferent. So gut health, sleep, and then moving your body too is an excellent way to improve overall functions. So I'll ensure that those things, I'll ask about if those things are happening. 9 times out of 10, if they're in front of me, it's not.
It's not. And I guess that brings us to the common, I don't feel like myself, and I'm irritated, and I can't remember. So this is where these sorts of coping mechanisms, I guess, come into play.
Absolutely. And I know there's so much, we're in the information age, there's so much amazing information online about how we can enhance our wellness practices, and it can get very fancy and technical, but to keep it simple is really, it's really a gift, right? Because most people these days can afford to keep it simple. And even if you are in a stage where you're limited resources or you're budgeting, still ensuring that, you're making time. A lot of times women as we mature and get older and we're doing all the amazing things, and, you know, myself as a new entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, again, we can neglect those pieces that keep us fueled and grounded. So ensuring that you are carving out that time to take care of yourself so that you can go and do all the other things for the family, the partner, the business, right? And also yourself. So yeah, those key areas are really important when we are trying to make sense of what the shift is. And the shift is real.
Yes,
it
absolutely.
is real. I turned 35 in a few months' time. And then when I turned 30, right, it was this newfound amazing experience. And I was just really excited about all the things. Kisha, when I hit 34 this year, actually, this conversation is so aligned because this year I have been holding space for what my medicine is. And I've noticed that things like my menstrual cycle or even the conversation around perimenopause may actually be my reality very soon because I've experienced some of those changes too. And I've had to do my research too. And what I kind of came to the conclusion with the help of my doctor is that I have to be held accountable for taking care of myself, because if those basic kind of practices aren't being met, or those resiliency kind of practices or rituals like I talk to my clients about aren't being taken care of, then everything is out of whack. So yeah, it's a reality for a lot of women, for sure.
Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
And you said a few things in there that I wanted to touch on, but one was definitely, what would you say to the woman who is doing it all, who thinks that she has to push through on her own, but she may be resistant to therapy or seeking support?
Yeah.
What do you say to this woman?
Well, I would ask her, how is it working out? How's it going for you? How's it going for you? And that's an honest question. Only she can answer that, right? But folks who are resistant to therapy, I understand, because a lot of the reasons that people give tend to be really, really close to trust, right? And how to actually go into a relationship with someone who you don't know, and they're just telling you they're a professional, and, you know, to be their professional secret keeper. And again, back to it being the information age, there are so many practices and rituals and professionals or experts that you can actually access before you even get to therapy. Now, I'm an advocate of therapy. I am a therapist that's had my own therapist. I truly fundamentally believe in holding space for people in that way with scientifically backed tools and modalities. However, I do acknowledge that it's an investment, number one, especially in our economy, and to be in a small community like ours with the risk of having confidentiality, broken, or maybe that's an experience that they've had in the past. There are ways that you can take care of yourself before you get there. However, I would, if there's someone listening to this, who is considering it, I would say treat it like shoe shopping.
Okay.
Treat it like shoe shopping. It's not one size fits all. I definitely think that you should, dig deep into who you are considering to be your therapist. Ask about their experience. Ask about how they handle confidentiality issues. Most therapists do have a preliminary call or like a consult call that's usually complimentary or free. And you can really, really find out as much as you need to before you make a decision, right? But I do believe that a collaborative approach when we're talking about hormonal health is best, and a therapist does have a place in that, right? So if you have, say, your specialist, your doctor, your coach, and you're looking to explore therapy to build in those resiliency tools and get like a granular look at what's happening, like a zoom in look at your emotions and your mood, it's well worth it. It's well worth it, but it has to be the right time and it has to be right for you,
Because like you said, it's a relationship at the end of the day.
Absolutely. It's a relationship. Yes.
Okay. So how would you support individuals who need to support the women in their lives that are going through this.
Yes. So people who are supporting women who are having hormonal disruptions or dysregulation, remain curious. Right? That's the best way that I can put it. When someone is having sudden changes, when someone's mood becomes erratic or irritable, or you just notice a change in folks, it can be really hard to not make it about self.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that too, even as a counselor, therapist. But you have to be curious when we're trying to be supportive for those people that we love, that we want to see thrive and excel. Recognize that people do go through changes. There are phases of people's lives that will change not just externally, but internally, especially for women. Again, men are part of this conversation. So if it's a partner, if it's a workmate, a friend, a colleague, remain as curious as possible, because when we don't get curious about what could be happening and instead lean into rigidity and judgmental kind of statements, or even a position, right? You feel when you're judging somebody.
Yeah.
It's very different from, I wonder what that is. So curiosity softens the approach with folks. Curiosity is acknowledging that it could be many things that are happening. And when you approach someone with curiosity versus rigidity or judgment, you stand the chance of actually getting into that conversation that leads to, what you need to find out in the process as well. And a lot of times when these things are happening to women, especially, they are in the dark as well.
Yes.
Like me. Then I, started to have these noticeable changes. I'm like, what is going on? So, it can be very, very hard for someone to sit with that. And what's interesting is even when I started to actually figure out that a lot of this had to do with my hormonal health and that there were things that I can do about it, I was like, thank God I'm not unraveling in a psychiatric way.
Yes.
Right. So I had to actually go back to people in my life who were closest to me at the time and be like, hey, I know that I've been a bit
Odd.
Yes. But I think I found out what's going on, and I have to make some changes in my daily practices and how I take care of myself. And I want you to know that I'm doing that right away. So I apologize. Yeah, that's a real conversation, and that's a good question.
And I think this is where where you mentioned earlier about mindfulness and self-awareness
Yes.
comes into play when
Absolutely.
dealing with your hormones.
And compassion, because it's essential. Yeah, everyone will change in some manner, right? Yeah.
So other than mindfulness, any other sort of techniques or exercises that people should consider when you're trying to realize that this is your reality now?
Absolutely. So mindfulness is a great practice. I stand by journaling. Journaling is another fantastic way, and I'm not talking about like through electronic devices. I mean pen to paper, because the research is clear that there is a processing that happens in our brains when you're doing pen to paper, and getting clear about what your internal experience is. So journaling, mindfulness practices that can look like moving your body, yoga, it can look like meditation, but whatever it is, it has to circle back to the intentional practice of figuring out what I need in the moment, right? And what my internal world is asking for. And whatever the disruption or difference or change is, that actually helps you to rule out what it could be. But when you don't have that stillness at whatever point in your week or your day, it really can, throw you further into some of the hormonal changes that are happening, like whether it's stress, right? Or the rise of cortisol or adrenaline, which also wreaks havoc on women's bodies. So definitely starting to get curious about your inner world, moving your body, talking to your GP. Your GP can actually help you with more of the scientific pieces around thyroid panels and blood work and all of these things that they can have a granular look at from a healthcare perspective. They're very, very useful. And I even believe that we have a hormone specialist. I don't want to miscall her name, but she is fabulous, and I know that she specializes in hormonal test and treatment, right? So we do have these people on island, and they're available. I would also say therapy is another tool as well, because sometimes when we have toxic stress, or we're living in an environment or have had traumatic experiences that can trigger those stress activation states, our nervous systems can be all out of whack, and your therapist can help with that, right? A lot of folks are trained to understand what your nervous system or stress state is, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. All of that has to do with the cortisol and adrenaline that's produced in our bodies, right? Which can trigger hormonal disruptions and changes. And so a therapist is also another fantastic resource in all of this. And then emotional regulation through whatever tools that you can find to release the stress that we carry in our bodies. So research and mental health literature talks about the fact that, again, therapy is a way to process and have the cortisol, contained and released. And then also, again, sweating. Sweating is another function of our body and our lymphatic system where cortisol can secrete through moving your body and through sweat as well. And there's, again, so much information around how we can have these kind of anti-inflammatory practices, whether it's through diet or therapy or moving your body. But as long as you are tapped in some way, I do believe that you tapped in consistently, right? Practicing these things consistently, I do trust that you can see changes in some way. Another thing that I also add in there, Kisha, is supplements. There are, in my own research and my own kind of reconfiguring of my wellness practices, and as I journey into 35 next year, there are a lot of supplements that can actually help you during those menstrual hormonal fluctuations. And speaking to your doctor about that is essential, but there are over-the-counter things that you can take just specifically for that time of the month that may feel very difficult. As it did for me. Yes.
Thank you. No, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned earlier, you touched on it briefly, just the importance of sleep. The importance of sleep on mental and emotional wellness. I mean, what does it look like if this woman isn't getting enough or that restful sleep?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying that it's a very disheartening experience to have sleep disruption or insomnia or just the lack of having a deep restful sleep. And we also, what I find when having these conversations with women is that unfortunately it's so disheartening because a lot of times the lack of a deep rest at night is so normalized also in our culture because of how much we're balancing. And it actually just feels like it's regular to get under 8 hours of rest for a lot of women. And I'm just always so taken back by it. So the mental health research and literature speaks specifically to how fundamental rest is to your overall mental stability. And it also talks about how when we are not getting a deep night's rest, when we're actually not entering into REM sleep, it actually increases the stress hormone, cortisol, and adrenaline in our bodies, which disconfigures our ability to think clearly. Our prefrontal cortex is disrupted. Our mood, of course, is out of whack. We feel more irritable, on edge, angry, intolerable. It can also trigger things like anxiety and depression to be exacerbated. Sleep also clears out those toxins in our body, right? It's a regenerative process when we're resting deeply at night. So sleep is actually the starting point. When I say keeping it simple, if you are not sleeping at night, that is absolutely where you should be starting there in a small way and figuring that out and then working yourself backwards. Because I really do believe that we underestimate how valuable a deep night's rest is and how important it is to our overall functions, let alone our hormonal health as well.
Absolutely.
It's critical. Yeah.
No, I thank you for that. And again, you also mentioned, now you're reaching this age where things are changing.
Absolutely.
Society would have us thinking that perimenopause and menopause is doom and gloom. Like, this is the end.
Wow.
How do you exactly? How do we reframe that? It's not. It's actually a beginning, another beginning.
That's actually what I was going to say. That's absolutely what I was going to say. I'm having the time of my life in my 30s, and I'm so grateful. However, it is a stage where I'm noticing that I was talking to my grandmother one time about it, and she said, I do think that women's bodies, I don't know if this is research or not, baby girl, but I think that our bodies change every 5 to 7 years, like in under 10-year period, right? And so I would encourage us to, reframe or actually change the language that we use. If we can just pivot in how we view a thing, right? Because to grow older is actually such a privilege in this day and age. And that's exactly how I look at it. However, when I'm having these conversations with women who have the doom and gloom sense about what it is to get older and grow wiser, and I am brought back to the fact that in a lot of ways, they are not embracing how important it is to manage others' expectations, if that makes sense, of what their life looks like. And so sometimes as women, we're the nurturers, we're providers in a lot of ways. We are the epicenter for taking care of our loved ones and everyone around us.
Absolutely.
And then that becomes our only lens in how we view growing older or wiser. It can feel doom and gloom because we've forgotten ourselves in that experience.
Exactly.
And our rituals, our practices, our self-care, our self-care practices as well, they should actually be getting a bit more, I don't want to say complex, but they should be getting more intentional. And then that piece is left behind and they have somehow found themselves stuck or unsure about what this journey means. Usually it brings them back, it brings us back in my work with women to how essential it is to have that part of your day or week dedicated to yourself. And I hope that makes sense. So in a simple form, for those who are feeling doom and gloom about getting older, I would ask, what does the relationship with yourself look like?
Yes.
Right? Bringing it back to them. And also, I'm not talking about who you are, what your role is, how many hats you wear, what your job position is. I'm talking about who you are to self, separate from all of those roles and titles and hats that you wear. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that also comes to the overwhelming piece of things.
Yes.
And the, balancing it all, or trying to balance it all, what balance even looks like these days. I have no idea, but the whole concept.
Yes, absolutely. And I always think about Michelle Obama and her, when she was on her Becoming book tour and had that fabulous book released. And she talked about how we can have it all, like with the balance, but we might not be able to have it all at the same time. And again, this brings us back to what women know best, and that's like the cyclical nature and phase of our womanhood. So everything comes in seasons, everything comes in time periods, and we dedicate ourselves to, again, the care and growth and nurturing and love of others so much, but the balance piece has to include you. It has to include how you're taking care of yourself in an intentional way. And she spoke about how so many fabulous women are talking about this now, but I remember her the most. She spoke about how it just won't happen. Like, no one's going to give you the time and consistency and care that you need better than yourself. And so I really do believe that every woman has this lived experience. It's something that I had to get real with myself as well about. And we have to give ourselves permission to lean into what we know is best for ourselves, because our health does depend on it. It really, really does. And most times when women are doing all of these things and wearing all these hats, it's such a performative nature. and you may be doing very well in it, right? Because we are multitaskers and chameleons at heart. Like, women are really killing it across. I'm so inspired by so many women that I encounter daily. However, in the process of doing all the things and living our purpose and taking care of others and hitting our protein intake and all those things, what do you feel about yourself in that? Because the lived experience and your felt sense also determines how your body responds to your environment, right? So there's a psychosomatic connection also between how we feel and what we believe about ourselves, which is also deeply connected to our hormonal health as well. So it's really a holistic kind of approach that we should all be leaning into, for sure.
And it's a journey, because it doesn't come just like that.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to acknowledge that you're even in this position to begin with.
Absolutely.
And then you're kind of undressing, like you're literally just releasing all of this stuff that you've been carrying for a very long time.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. You are becoming very vulnerable and unpacking a lot of stuff that we have been kind of conditioned to believe around womanhood. And I'm just so grateful also for the outer women and the women that I've encountered in my journey who I see are living their experience in a way that's intentional to what feels good for them and cultivating their lives and designing their lives, really designing the life that they believe that they deserve and they desire. Even this, being on the Beauty and the Wise podcast, this is like, I'm so inspired by you and your journey. And even when I first encountered you as well, like, I always remember how kind you were and just open to building a connection as well. So I'm always inspired by women who are doing all the things, but it is an undressing and it's an unlearning. And as you go through these phases and cyclical seasons as well, I think it also, you learn as you go, but also you are noticing that with each season, there's something different that's being asked of you. And whether that's your wellness practice, your hormonal health, it's each stage informs the next, right? So yeah, definitely. It's an undressing. I'm actually going to steal that. That's really good. It's like you're getting naked.
Feel free.
Yes, thank you.
I have a bit of brain fog, so I can't remember what I said, but go ahead and use it, however.
I'll credit you for sure.
So let's go back and talk about the real mental health challenges in regards to depression. Like, how would a woman, what does it feel, or how does she know that I'm not just today? Everybody's sad. Everybody's sad at some point.
Yes, everyone has said
we have this, but how do I know I'm not depressed? Or maybe I am and I don't even realize it.
Yeah, and that's such a good question, because I noticed that there are a lot of high functioning women who don't realize that they're depressed. And when you are busy doing all the things and constantly in the throes of just doing, performing, and not being still, right? When you do actually gotta have a moment to be still, you may feel a sense of like something's not right there, but it doesn't always land with depression. This is also very true for women, but also women of color as well. And we mistake the duty of wearing so many hats and just getting on with it as something that we just have to do. But sometimes it's under the guise and the fog of depression as well. So it really does require, again, back to what we were saying about mindfulness, the chance to just slow down and actually observe yourself and have a in-depth conversation with yourself about what's happening. Sometimes that's actually very difficult. So you have to seek a second party or someone that I like to call a mirror that's holding up, like, I've noticed that this has been different for you. I've noticed that you're taking longer to respond back. Like, we're not going on our walks as much as we used to, you sounded different on the phone. So a lot of times it's actually someone reflecting back to you what they see, and then you may get actually curious about it. And then sometimes it just lands at being burnt out and you just crashed and feel like you actually can't action the next thing that needs to be done because your body won't allow you. So hopefully it doesn't have to come to that, but it does have a lot to do with the awareness of what your body is saying. And an approach that I actually take in my philosophy, an approach that I take in my work with folks is to be trauma informed, but also to include the somatic lens around just noticing what your body is asking you in the moment. And we can be so disconnected from our rational kind of checklists of doing all the things and what your body is actually saying, that your body will be saying one thing, but your mind will be saying another. So it feels very disconnected in that way. But I always ask folks to think about or feel, right? Tap into what your body is saying. And it can be the small things, the very, very small things. But there are signs that your body will give you, and then there are things that people will reflect back to you. But it can be very, very difficult, like you said, because it is an undressing, and the vulnerability around, like even saying out loud, like I think I'm depressed, can be very hard for folks. So there is a level of stillness that needs to be harnessed. And until someone gets still, it can actually be very hard to actually have those things reflected back or even felt within yourself, right? But I do see depression under the guise of just checkboxing, wearing all the hats, being the high achiever, the overperformer, the overcompensator, the one that takes care of everybody, right? It can look like all of those things. And I'm really starting to believe actually textbook definitions of depression actually are, I don't even know if they exist anymore, because we're in there's definitely a diagnostic assessment that can let you know if you're depressed. But I do believe that our world has changed so rapidly these days that depression is starting to take on new forms. And a lot of us are unaware of what depression actually looks like, because you see the conversations online when someone's depression unfortunately does end in them harming themselves or taking their own lives. The first thing you see is like, I would have never known, right? They were just doing this. I just spoke to them on the phone. They were just laughing. They were just helping me plan this event.
Exactly.
And so unfortunately, it is one of those hard things that we do have to get honest and vulnerable again and open about, to actually say if I'm feeling myself, and have someone actually that you trust reflect that back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And is that also, would you put high functioning ADHD women in there as well? And I say that because most people also associate or hear ADHD with kids and children.
Yeah.
People don't think about it in grown adult women.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. So I am also an adult that lives with adult ADHD as well. And, that is an experience. Living with adult ADHD is also directly connected to my hormonal health as well. And we do see a lot of the kind of information and content that's being put out there by the professionals around children, but there is another untapped population of women, and I love this for us, that are finding out that actually that little quirk or weirdness about myself that I always embraced but others didn't, that actually had a meaning. There was something about that I missed in my early stages. And I do see it as something that does play a huge role in the experience of women's mental health and hormonal health. And sometimes, again, when we're talking about, hormonal disruptions or dysregulation mimicking mental health disorders, ADHD can be caught in that overlap as well. And that's also been my experience as well when I was digging deep around, how to take care of myself during my menstrual phases. That was something that I did see does influence the emotional dysregulation, and also the things that I was putting in my body that may be activating my stress response as well.
Got it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But I do think that we are a unique, special bunch, and it's ADHD, again, and reframing is a superpower. That's how I view mine, because it allows me to tap into, again, this level of creativity and things that folks who may be neurotypical don't always see. And I value that, right? So when we change the lens around, it's reframing how we talk about ourselves and view ourselves. And it's really an empowering experience when you get clear on what that means for you and how to develop your medicine or your ritual to take care of that.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, it's so important.
It is.
That's a great
It
question.
really is. It really is. Okay, so what, I mean, because we could talk about this, we could keep going forever.
Yeah.
But so what sort of advice would you give to women who are looking to kind of rebuild? Like we said, this is another beginning. We're talking about confidence. We're talking about emotional resilience.
Yes.
Like what sort of advice would you give to women?
I would say to slow down, number one. Slowing down is the number one way that we can give our nervous system the peace and flow that we seek so many times. And everything feels like it's urgent if you are constantly operating like you're a firewoman, right? And you're just putting out fires. Slowing down is an underrated practice to become aware on purpose and mindful on purpose, and then allow yourself to see what is urgent and what isn't. So slowing down is a beautiful way to begin that healing process before you even get to a therapist, right? Slowing down is what your nervous system is seeking to take you out of that fight, flight, freeze experience for sure. The next thing is paying attention on purpose, right? You can do this with journaling. You can do this by moving your body. You can do this by just getting still, which ties in with slowing down. The other piece is to get honest with yourself as well. So depending on how long you've been experiencing these symptoms, I always say 2 weeks is too long, but 2 weeks can turn into a month, can turn into a quarter, it turns into half a year to a year. So how long have you not felt yourself? And you know that best. You're the expert. You're the expert in your experience. And so this is, if any of this, what we've mentioned during this talk has been happening to you, taking that inventory is essential, right? And that can be done before you even get into a professional's door, a coach's door, a doctor's door, a therapist's door. And then when you go into that door, if you actually get to that point, you have data to say, this is what's been happening to me, and I know that I'm not myself, right? And also compassion, because stigma and shame also produces a stress response. It disconnects us further. And women are so, vast and multidimensional and lovely and wonderful, but we carry a lot of shame about our inner world. And so the shame, it needs to be unlearned. And we do that by what we're doing now, through these stories on your lovely podcast, but then also when we get honest with ourselves and when we put shame about what our lived experience has been into the light, it can't exist anymore, because you've now earned that, right? You've now said, I can't function like this anymore. So slowing down, getting still, taking an inventory, and then understanding that shame is a disconnector. It prevents you from actually living your most best authentic life. And it also actually increases that stress response of adrenaline and cortisol and whatever else may be underlying under all those, symptoms that you're experiencing. So yeah, we get better together, and there's always someone else that you find out, like, me too, I've been going through it as well. Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what is one practice or mindset shift that you want women to adopt to kind of protect her mental and emotional well-being? If it was one piece of advice or practice or, like I said, a mindset shift that you would tell a woman, what would it be?
It would,
especially during this hormonal transition, what would it be?
Yes, it would be that your body will speak. Your body will tell you all the time. Even if you're rationally not aware, if you're trying to justify it or overlook it or just do the next thing on your checklist. Listen to your body, babe, because it will tell you every time what it is that you need. And sometimes we listen too late, right? When we're at the point of crashing out, burnout, all the things. And we don't have to, we can prevent it before it gets there. The other piece is that you're worthy, right? You're worthy of living a life that feels not just good for others around you, but that feels good for you and intentional and purposefully designed for you. And we don't hear that enough. You're worthy, and to give yourself permission to take up that space that's needed a lot of times, that's denied in all of the other hats that we're wearing and all of the fabulous things that we're doing. So you're always worthy. Give yourself permission and to listen to your body. Listen to your body. That's what I would say. 3 takeaways.
Thank you.
Yes.
This has been absolutely a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thankful that you said yes and you're here. So thank you.
So am I. Thank you.
I appreciate your wisdom. You care about this.
Yes.
You really do, and it shows. So I really do appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, my lady.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you. To every woman listening, please remember that what you're feeling is real, valid, and worthy of support. You are not too emotional, you are not losing yourself, and you are not alone. Hormonal changes can impact your mood, your energy, your relationships, and the way you see yourself. But with the right tools and support, you can navigate this stage with strength and compassion. If you'd like to connect with Dayla or learn more about the TeleConnect Bermuda, her information will be listed in the episode description. And if you're ready to explore your own hormone health and emotional well-being more deeply, you can connect with me through Inzuri Wellness for coaching and resources. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Beauty and the Wise. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube or catch us on Channel 82, and also follow us on our social media. Until next time, take care of your body, protect your peace and your spirit.